How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the podcast. I'm just walking here with the goats, and there's no wind or little wind, so wanted to record a quick podcast. Been doing a lot of agave content, or a lot, 2 episodes, and people said, well, why'd you call it the Agave and Cactus podcast? You got to talk about cactus too, and well, I'm getting to it. Today's episode is going to be about cactus farming, so let's get right into it. Today's podcast will be titled or something along the lines of how farming cactus can help California ranches be more profitable. I'll share some of my experiences with my goat operation and my bird operations, and how cactus is involved in that. And then I'll try and share a little bit about the products I make with cactus, as well as how you can make some money with cactus, as well as using it on your ranch. So, I'll get into some of the Opuntia varieties and different cactus varieties that I grow here. So, just to start it off, let's see if I can name some of these off the top of my head. I've got Opuntia ficus indica, which is the main, you could say, cactus or nopal grown in Mexico for fruit, pads, biofuels, all types of different, commercial uses. And, it's the one that's the most proven already. But it has a lot of, disease and just problems because it is the one that most people use. So it's the one that's planted a lot in monoculture, getting stuff, right? I've also got, lots of hybrids of those. My goats are crazy. I've got lots of hybrids of those. Opuntia ficus indicas. I've got some wild Opuntias that I've collected. They're not wild, I guess, but they're like, I didn't go to the wild to get them, but they're wild because they're Opuntia species that people don't really farm, in my opinion. In Mexico they probably farm like 20 different type of Opuntias, but they mainly focus on a lot of the fruit production, and then a couple other people focus on the pad production. But you don't see a lot of hybridization. You don't see a lot of mixing in new types of Opuntias and seeing what can create. And that's what I'm trying to do a little bit here, because with some of those hybrids I'm getting better pads or better fruit, right? So I kind of got off on a tangent here, but the Opuntia ficus, because it's such a important crop already, that's why I've been hybridizing it with every other cactus that I have. So I give an example. I've got the Texas prickly pear, which is Opuntia, linguiformis engelmani, I think. And this is a very common prickly pear in Texas. That's why its name is that. But interesting, fact that I recently learned about this Opuntia is that it's a Opuntia that's used on 20% of cattle operations in the state of Texas. And, I've got it growing here in Southern California in the Mojave Desert, and it's one of my strongest cacti. And I'm using it to feed goats, and the fruits I'm making, products out of and eating them. And the pads, actually, after a little torching, are very easy to cook, or, if I did have cows, I could give them to the cows. But my goats actually don't really need the cacti to be despined. They don't really care. They could just eat them. That's actually some advantages to having goats versus cows, because they can eat certain spine stuff. Like another species that I grow is silver and golden cholla, which is Cylindropuntia echinocarpa. Those are native to the Mojave Desert here in California. Heavily spined. I wouldn't really think that a goat would want to eat them, but they do. They eat them all the time. The jackrabbits specifically love them, so I have to have them, in my fenced-in portions so that they don't get whacked, and then keep them away from the goats. The goats kind of eat cholla as like a last resort, but I guess it is there if it grows easy in your area, because golden, silver cholla grows super fast if you water it. It's one of these cacti that I tell people, like, they're super extremely drought tolerant, but at the same time, they're water lovers, so they could be flooded and grow, 2, 3, 4 times faster. I see a lot of that with agave as well. Going off of the cholas, I also have California native Cylindropuntia imbricata, and Southwest native. I think it's native to Nevada, Arizona, Utah, a couple of these southwestern states. And then I also have the subspecies of it, Spinosaur, which isn't a California native. Well, it's debated. I don't know if it's a California native. People say it is, and other people say it's not, but it's definitely a Southwest USA native. And those cholas actually have way less spines, and the goats readily eat them. I've seen in a lot of research, the cows, the sheep, lots of different animals like pigs eat them, and so lots of uses for that Cylindropuntia imbricata over, say, a golden or silver cholla. Then I also have native to California Opuntia faecanta, and Opuntia faecanta is found here in the Mojave Desert. It's also called the tulip prickly pear. It's got a purple kind of / pinkish fruit, very, very juicy. Got a lot of seeds, which I don't mind, because those I actually use for making jams. So make really sweet and juicy jam, save all the seeds and propagate them. And that's a lot of the new cacti varieties that are popping up of faecanta that I have. I have lots of different flowering types of it because of starting it from seed. And interestingly enough, I leave a lot of that fruit on the cactus so that the birds can spread it. And essentially the birds, maybe even the rodents, I'm not sure if they could climb up the cactus like that, but the birds are the ones that I've proven it already, that are just propagating Opuntia, Cylindropuntia all over my farm, even in rain gutters and in random places that I would have never thought the cactus would sprout up, because they eat the fruit and deposit the seeds. And for instance, I give an example: goats, if they eat the cactus or the prickly pears of any of my Opuntias or cacti here, they won't spread the seed, but the rodents and the bird do. So they're not destroying the seed in their gut microbiome. And that's how nature spreads a lot of stuff. Like, I don't remember the exact number, but I think like 50 or 75% of all Joshua tree propagation in the wild is like due to ground squirrels. So I'm trying to use a lot of the native wildlife here to spread the seed for me and kind of do the planting for me. Because if they can seed propagate for me and I'm just kind of picking up stuff when it's a little older and moving it, then I kind of don't really need greenhouses, because they're pretty much doing it for me, and the plants are stronger because they're seeding in the wild medium that they're going to grow their whole life in already, not in a greenhouse. It's like, there's always this shock period from bringing plants out from the greenhouse into the wild, because they've been in this environment where there's no wind and there's no, there's no issues with the plant, right? So then, it's perfect water, perfect light, perfect wind, all of this stuff, and then, yeah, the plants get shocked when they come out. My bad. One of my dogs were trying to punk a goat into moving. Had to go throw a stick at him, but it's all good. Billy, vete para acá. Tonto. No andas ahí. Mira, vente. Vente con papa. But, yeah, getting back to the cacti. I guess this will be a long podcast, but I'm trying to explain some of the cacti that I grow so that you have options for planting cacti, right? Every cacti that I have has taken down to 17, 18 Fahrenheit and grown, in a heavy wind environment where there's always 20 to 40 mile per hour winds, extreme winds sometimes of 60, 70. We got frost, we got a little snow. So, they're growing in a really rough environment, right? So, if you're out on the coast of California or, forest of Arizona, a little better spot, I would say. This is what we say in Spanish. It's going to be papitas for you. It's going to be just super easy for you. And that's kind of the point. I push a lot of these plants to show people everywhere where they could go, right? But getting back to the cacti, I also got Opuntia. My favorite Opuntia that I've been growing recently is Opuntia Hybrid GTO, which is I mixed the spineless Burbank prickly pear, which is a large fruit producing prickly pear that was created here in California by Mr. Burbank, super sick cactus legend propagator and hybridizer. And so I combined his really good spineless pads, which are great for food and combustible and all that, and then large fruits. I combined that with a Opuntia that I got some seeds from Guanajuato and planted it, and then I grew it out to a tree, and then I took some of those pollen from the fruit and hybridized it with a Ficus indica I had, and I created the hybrid GTO, which is essentially like a frickin' monster. Like, I've got it at my house, and it's also a tree now. Within just 2.5 years, it's grown super, super fast. So I've got some at my house in Altadena, which is like the forest, and some here out in the desert, the Mojave Desert, and you could dry farm it. It could take all the temperatures I just mentioned, and then, it can also, it loves water. So, like, a lot of these cacti can be water lovers and dry farmed at the same time in different climates, right? So, like, the more you water that cactus, the faster it's going to grow. And, if you dry farm it, it can take drought and still continue to grow. So, I'm really excited about that one, but I'm a little bummed out about the fruit. It's medium sized, it's not the best. The pads are actually my top one ranked out of like 30 or 40 different cacti that I have here that are Opuntias that I eat. But because they're less sour. But still, the fruit I think can be improved on, so I'm going to keep hybridizing GTO, and we'll see what pops up. So then, I also grow some Peruvian apple cactus, which is Cereus family of cacti, and the Cereus family of cacti has been heavily used in Brazil for combustibles and consumables, products, and then it's also been used for a lot of cattle operating and a lot of sorry, I had to pause because the goats were getting away from me, but I had to chase them for like a minute or two and get them back on course. Doing a cool little loop right now around my lands. Whew. But yeah, what I was saying is that in Brazil, a lot of the Cereuses are now being used on cow operations, and they're noticing a lot of the things I wanted to talk about today, where it's helping them become more profitable. So now that I've told you a little bit about some of the Opuntia varieties that I may have here, you know, you can use that info to choose some really hardy varieties if you're in desert climates, or varieties, you know, those varieties will grow quicker for you in, you know, more coastal climates and stuff like that. Another one I quickly mention is Opuntia littoralis, which is naturalized in California, but it's from Baja California, and it's a cactus that produces really strong, juicy fruits that are red, dark red. It grows as ground cover, so it doesn't grow like a tree, a lot of the other Opuntias, and it's a perfect cactus for a ground cover, but it also produces really tasty pads. So that's also one that, you know, you can dry farm and grow just off rain. Perfect trap plant as well. So now, like I said, I told you a couple of the cacti that I grow. Let's get into how it's affecting the farm over here, right? So how has all of this cactus made me more profitable goat farm, and how can it make other California ranches more profitable, right? So the main two expenses you're gonna have when you have a lot of animals are gonna be your feed and your water, right? So your feed and your water, a lot of the times is gonna be where you either win or lose on your animals, right? So I'll give an example. Alfalfa has gone down a little bit, but just for the sake of the example, say the bales are $20 and you're selling your goats at 200. You can't really sell or give your goat more than, you know, 9 bales of hay and still be profitable. And if you did 9 bales of hay, you'd be at around 9 days of food for that goat and only make a 10% margin, right? A very low profit business. That's why most people don't run their goat operations just on alfalfa. Most goat farms around me are small time, maybe like anywhere from like just a handful of goats to 20 goats, and they give them all grain and alfalfa, and that's because it's not a business. That's not, you know, they're not looking to make money. They're selling animals in many cases at losses, just giving them away in others. They look at it more as like a homestead hobby thing where I just want to have goats, and when they have kids, we'll figure out what to do with them instead of kind of proactively planning. And that's why everyone around me that has goats tells me goats are extremely not profitable because I spend 10 times the amount on raising them than I can make. And I agree with them when you use that system, just grain and alfalfa. So I give an example. If you have a goat operation in Northern California, you got lots of great forage almost year round, except maybe in the summer. And as I've shown here on my farm in the desert, if you got enough land, even the low forage in the summer is going to be sufficient if you know how to move your goats accordingly, or your cow or your sheep or whatever, right? But the point being is you got a lot of forage, you don't need to buy a lot of feed, right? So, you know, a lot of the operating of sheep and goats that I've had in Northern California, they've run on pretty much free feed because they've always been on wineries or vineyards, or they've always been on farms, or they've always been making money. So not only do I not pay for the feed, but I make money with the goats, right? But now here in SoCal, it's a completely different thing. But just to show you that the majority of large commercial goat farms are going to be in these areas where they can get feed and water for very, very cheap, like Northern California, right? A place where they got abundant water resources and they have abundant land for not too expensive, and abundant forage, right? So over here in Southern California, we don't really have that. We got to, play the game differently. But let's just make a real simple example here. Let's say you spend, if you had 1,000 goat or 1,000 cattle operation, just for the sake of example, right? Like, it'll vary obviously, but say you spend 50,000 on the, your feed cost, and another 50,000 on your water cost, right? Obviously, this is not a accurate representation, but we're just using it for the example. So what I know is that a lot of the cacti species are anywhere from 75 to 90% water weight, and the rest being dry matter, which is usually high fiber, high protein, lots of vitamins and minerals, which is why cactus is amazing to eat for us as humans too, not only for the animals, but because it's so high in water, it's going to lower your water bill tremendously. And here's this example that I've seen in a lot of research. So from Brazil to America, we're seeing that you can feed anywhere from 45% to 70% of cattle feed as cactus. And, maybe in goats, I could say that could be 5-10% higher. But let's just keep it at an even 60%, right? So let's say your animals can take 60% of cattle as feed, and you're growing this on your farm, dry farm status. You choose species that could just live off the rain, and you got species that might be spineless or easy, fast growing that you can give to your cows or your goats, right? Well, you've spent very little resources to grow that cactus besides planting it. So, maybe that first year you'll have a payback of all that labor and resources, with the cactus lasting, multi-generations. And every year it's going to grow more and more and produce more and more feed and water resources for your animal. So if you're in a desert environment like me, I don't have a well here. I have to catch rainwater, or in extreme cases, I'll have to order water for the animals. The plants can live without water, but the animals can't, right? So I have to buy water or catch water, and when I catch water, these rain catchment systems cost me money to build, right? So they have payback periods as well. So getting back on track here, if 60% of the feed could be cactus, and you're spending $50,000 on feed a year for your animal operation, whether it's birds or cows or goats, you're going to now have, instead of a $50,000 bill, you're going to have a $20,000 bill. So you've dropped it $30,000, right? Because 60% of $50,000, right? So that's a significant savings. That's a lot of money, right? And that's going to scale up or scale down to your operation, right? 60% of feed cost. That's great. But then remember, I told you that the cactus is 90-10 or 80-10, where it's water or / dry weight. So if it's eating 60% of the feed, and 90% of that feed is water, that's going to have a significant impact on the water consumption of that animal. So I'll give the example of my goats. When my goats are eating cactus the whole day, they drop their water consumption 70 to 80%, which means, going back to my example, if you have, 60% of the feed being cactus, and it drops, say, whatever animal you have, 70, 80% in water consumption, now you've dropped your water bill, doing some quick math, like 45%, So you not only drop your feed bill 60%, but now you drop your water bill 45%. So instead of paying that $50K for your water, you're now going to pay somewhere like 20, 23, doing quick math, right? So you could save overall, now you add the 27 that you saved plus the 30, you saved, 57K out of the 100K that you would have spent. So to save 57% on operating costs as a farm just by using cactus, that's a tremendous freaking value. Most people's margins are 5 to 10%. You get me? Which is a whole other podcast that I can make, which is freaking ridiculous. I mean, farming is hard already. Don't get into animals if you don't know anything about business. Like, this shit is even harder. But, if their margins are so low, this is the thing that can keep them in business. This is the thing that can give them a margin that now is not, we're just getting by month to month, but we're actually have some money to put in the bank and, save and do a little bit more that we weren't doing, Tremendous. So, we have millions of acres in California that are, under cow and sheep and goats. I'm trying to maybe pull up a quick figure here. So, an article everyone should go read that I was reading actually that made me make this podcast because I was thinking about it is on farmprogress.com, and it's called Strategic Fodder, Cactus to the Rescue as Livestock Feed. And they provided some really cool figures in here that made me think about how I'm using cactus and how it could be a little bit more profitable, because I started thinking about it from a business side and not a, theory or a, let's do it instead of read about it type thing, But so yeah, here the figure that they provide is in California there's 38 million acres of private and publicly owned family rangelands throughout the state. That's insane. That's so large, and now add the sheep, the goats, the pigs. I've got emus, quail, ducks, chicken, geese. All of them eat cactus. You add all of those acres up. Oh man, I mean, if 38 were just the cows, I would say it's probably 50 or 60 million acres when you include all these other birds and pigs and other ruminants, right, that are going into meat, dairy, or other types of, livestock business in California. So this is some of the big picture stuff here, right? If we can put 50% more margin into a lot of these farms that are on the brink of bankruptcy, many of them, and on very, very running on slim margin, that's huge, man. That's huge. And like I said, there's tons of native California species of cactus that are growing here, that I'm growing here. In this article, they talk about actually how they're running a test farm here in California. Let me see if I can pull up the actual farm so you guys could have that info. 15-acre trial plot on John Diner's Red Rock Ranch, funded by California State University, Agricultural Research Institute, and the California Department of Water Resources. So they're testing out to see if it can grow in really messed up lands that have, a lot of salt and poor soils, and they're seeing what can happen. And they just they're talking about how it can be a high value crop for farmers to survive prolonged droughts and reductions in water allotments. All very true. So I guess CSU Fresno is the people that are working with that farm. But here's the thing that I was getting at when I was reading this. A lot of the state and these people are trying to run these test plots in California of cactus farming, and I kind of think it's the wrong way to approach it. You know what I mean? We shouldn't be funding, let's add 15 acres of opuntia here. And I don't know about this farm, by the way. They could be doing an amazing job. I'm just using them as a quick example, not saying anything about them. But instead of funding a 15-acre new farm, why not find these other cactus farmers like me that already have a few acres, that have, we're not going to plant a monoculture like I'm sure that CSU Fresno sponsored farm is. Well, I won't say that. Maybe they're planting a bunch of different species and I'm just being mean. But most of the time, a lot of these research projects just focus on Opuntia ficus indica. And it's kind of like crazy to me because one, it takes a lot of water, and two, it just has so much pest, right? I'll give an example of in Tunisia, they've got around 600,000 acres of prickly pear, Opuntia ficus, and they've lost, like, in some years, 10-20% of the crop to cochineal plague. When you have large monoculture of Opuntia ficus, it can go upside down really, really fast. It's a great crop, but it needs to be grown responsibly, So it's like, that's why I think it's a great crop to incorporate with tons of native California and Southwest USA cacti varieties, and varieties of cacti from all over the world that could be used for human and animal consumption, all types of cactus products, right? So yeah, getting back to how this affects a little bit, or let me try to finish that example actually about the California, because I kind of got off track. Yeah, they should just be funding farms that already exist instead of creating new ones, because a lot of the farms like me have really diverse cactus agriculture going on, and we're already making products out of it and showing people what you could do. And most of the cactus people, or cactus farmers like me, because it is something niche in the United States, read up on a lot of the history. So we've seen already how a lot of the California native or indigenous people, the Southwest indigenous tribes, the Mexican tribe, all the way down to Peru, have used cactus, right? I've seen how Africa has used it. I've seen how people in Europe have used it. I mean, cactus has already done what I hope happens in agave, that it's gone global. It's everywhere. I mean, like I just mentioned, there's 600,000 acres of it growing in Tunisia. That's not a small amount. I mean, there's 550,000 acres of grapes in California, and it's the number one crop in California. So, Tunisia's got a giant amount of prickly pears growing, right? So yeah, we should just be helping out these farms that are already proving the things that they're trying to research, because I kind of see it like a waste of research funding if they're just going to come up with the conclusions that these farmers already have made, right? Like, no offense to CSU Fresno, but that study will probably just prove what I'm proving already, which is this is a great cash crop that you can grow in California, dry farm it, you can irrigate it and grow it quicker in certain areas. You can create a diverse range of products with it. You can use it for animals and make your rents more profitable. So I kind of see it as a waste of money, to be honest with you. But let's get to how the cactus is used here on the farm in combination with the goats. So I told you that, my goats lower their water consumption 75% by, eating, this cactus. But all of this cactus is growing just off of rainwater that I have here. And, I collect some of it, and in the summers, if it gets really crazy, I'll water some of these cacti to grow quicker, if they run out of water in their soil. So in really, really arid landscapes like here, I can grow cacti with no new water resources. Like, I don't need a well. I don't have a well. And I keep saying this, but it's like I want to see how far I could go without the well. So I'm just building more rain roofs and more rain roofs and capturing more rainwater. And I've been scaling that way instead of, it's a modular way of scaling that's I can afford it little by little instead of a well that, I can afford it, but it's going to be so much money, and it just is an unsustainable way of extracting water versus the rain water. But yeah, I don't need a well to produce all this cacti goodness. So if I'm growing alfalfa or grain, not only do I need a tractor to do all types of land preparation, I need an extreme amount of water and a giant well to feed all of these giant, if I grew alfalfa or corn or grain here, I would be likely using one of those giant, dang it, now I'm going to sound like a noob because I forget the name, but these giant, the center pivots. Yeah, the center pivot irrigation sprinklers, that's how everyone grows all that here. In Lancaster, California, where I'm at, we grow a lot of alfalfa, and then, traditionally, like in the 40s, when we had like 4 or 5 times more agricultural land under production here in Lancaster, which is interesting because none of it was irrigated, while now it's irrigated and we have way less. They were growing wheat and barley and grains back then just off rain. And I'm like, shit, like climate changed, I guess, but there's a lot to learn from those older farmers because they were dry farming in areas that, today are heavily irrigated and we're like not really doing much innovation. But getting back to the cactus, so I could grow all this cactus for very low resources and make, good effects on my goats. And I also, like I said, give it to every single bird, so I'm using less feed and water for all of them as well. But, another thing I wanted to talk about is how, all of the feed for cattle and goats has been going up like crazy. And how cattle could be kind of like a backup resource, right? So it's like, even if you're giving alfalfa and grain and or even forage to a lot of your animals, cactus could be an excellent backup, because if a fire comes and destroys your forage, well, a lot of the cactus might survive the fire or even serve as a fire break and stop the fire from transversing into your land if you use it as a fence. And, now that a lot of the forage is gone, you still have some food for your animals, And farmers in Texas kind of use it like that during times of drought. When there is no forage, they go to the cactus and they burn off the spines and they give it to the animals. So they're using it already as a backup resource, actually. But at the same time, what if your alfalfa guy raises his price double? What if your silage guy raises his price double? Now your little margin went away and you're out of business in the grand scheme of things because your feed or went up too crazy. Well, cactus allows you options. It gives you the option of having this backup resource that you could feed your animals, because say one year you don't want to give the cactus to the goats or the birds or your cows. Well, it's just going to grow more, and any pads that fall on the ground are just going to root and create a new cactus. So it's like you're creating a feed bank, You got 5 years, say, of cactus growth, and you got some big old nice trees, Oh, well, just run the cactus through a little grinder. And now you create really, quick feed that could go to the animals. Because when you're giving them the pads and stuff, it takes a little bit for them to eat it. But my point is, the cactus is just a water and feed reservoir, right? So you could use it, how I do a little bit all the time, or you can use it how the Texans use a lot of the Texas prickly pear I told you I grow here, which is use it as a bank in times of, emergency. So that's where it can kind of be a cool little thing there, right? So, let me get into now. I feel like this podcast is going to go on forever, my bad. But I just wanted to really get into it. So let's talk about how I make some money with my cactus, right? So obviously, because the goats are making me more money by using the cactus, but the cactus prickly pears, I also grow them, or use them, to make jams, and I'll sell the fruit, and I'll sell the seeds. I'll sell the pads that are a little bit more mature and thick for people to plant all across the United States or internationally sometimes. And then I create and breed hybrids of the cacti, which is, way easier than agave, because in agave I have to time it up really good, a cactus might, or an agave might take 7 years, and another one takes 9, and I have to start one 2 years earlier, or like have backups, you know what I mean? But the cacti, every year they have flowers that I can just freaking hybridize. And a lot of the times, as I told you, the insects or the birds are kind of doing the cross-pollination for me, because a lot of those new seeded versions are coming out with different flowers or different traits, and I'm just like, shit, I don't know if like I even need to hybridize stuff anymore if nature is hybridizing it quicker and faster and more efficient than me. You know what I mean? But I still try. I don't give up, even though nature is just amazing. But so yeah, I make tons of, or not tons, but a decent amount of money from the cactus itself, while the goats are not eating it. The cactus also makes my agave be a little bit more profitable, just because the cacti is serving as trap plants. So whenever I have cactus close to the agave, the ground squirrels, the gophers, the jackrabbits, the what's these other fuckheads, kangaroo rats, they don't go for my agave. When there's a cactus nearby, they'll eat the cactus to the ground, but the cactus grows fast, so it'll regrow. But if a 2-year-old agave gets its core eaten out by that rodent, it's done. So that's why I say cactus is a perfect trap plant, because if the rodent that day that came into the section that got lucky, my dogs didn't see him, comes through, he's going to go for the cactus. It's more full of water, it's more full of protein and food that this little rodent wants right now, right? And then the rodent, it's not, well, I was going to say it's not dumb, but here's the thing, it's like, the rodent knows I'm going to eat this cactus up to a certain point and come back later and eat more of it. And I feel like sometimes, because agave is not native, a lot of the ones we're planting here, it doesn't do that with the tequilianas or the americanas and stuff like that. It just eats the core, and it's like, oh, I'm going to come back and there's still a little bit of this agave to eat, but it dies, right? So I mention that because on native agaves like the Cherty and Paris and whatchamacallit, like other stuff like Filifera that's not native to California but native to the Southwest, I've noticed that the rodents chew the leaves but never eat the core. So they've realized what I told you with the cactus, where like they're like, oh, I could eat a little bit and come back later and get a little bit more, but I'm not going to kill it and like destroy my food source. So I don't know if that's due to us bringing plants from other areas and the rodents aren't accustomed to it, or like what's up with that, but that's just some quick thing I've noticed. So the agave are growing better because the cactus are right next to them. Yeah. So a lot of the oh, my bad, I was making sure that my dog wasn't getting on my goat right there. But yeah, I just wanted to make this podcast talking about how cactus can make your farm a little bit more profitable, and some of the species and some of what I do with the cactus. Cactus, the many different varieties have a lot of potential, and I definitely agree with the article that I mentioned to you, that cactus can come to the rescue and help out animal operations. And I think cactus can grow pretty much in all of California, except maybe in the top tips north of Northern California. And a lot of the varieties that I grow probably couldn't grow there, like in heavy snow, but there are heavy snow opuntias, you get me? So there are other ones that I don't grow here that could potentially grow in NorCal and still produce pads and fruit and be great for animals and stuff. So you got to do your research a bit there. Opuntia has gone all over the United States, and there's tons of native varieties all over the U.S. There's some even as far as Florida. I mean, I don't know if there's native varieties in Oregon and Washington, but I would bet on it. I mean, there's got to be a couple, right? So I think this is something that can be applied to a lot of animal agriculture and ranches in California. Ranches are ones I see are always on the edge, on the brink, getting screwed left and right, and cactus could be this way to, make sure that they stay in the game, because during, the past few years with just commodity pricing and stuff just fluctuating like crazy, it's like you start to see like, wow, I've had this really great thing going, but I depend on exterior feed and stuff, and if it gets out of the price that I want, it just doesn't allow for me to be profitable anymore. And that's definitely why I began dry farming, or just bringing the goats out to forage. When prices got too crazy, I didn't see any scale in it, So, if you listen to my Agave and Goats podcast, you'll see how I use the goats to kind of replace like a crew of 10 pretty much that were doing all the maintenance and weeding and all of the plant or field clearing. And now the goats are like my hardest workers ever, and, they make my farm extremely profitable on the agriculture side. But, cactus can make your ranch more profitable, but the animals can also make your cactus farm more profitable, or your agave farm more profitable, right? Because they're going to maintain ground cover low so that you're not going in there and having to take out stuff that's competing with your plants. They're going to be aerating, fertilizing, and maintaining all of your agave or cactus plants. And they're also going to be involved in a lot of the harvest, if you want, or a lot of the field prep. And, it just is kind of like a little reinforcing cycle of more profitability by just having both than one or the other. Like if I just had a cactus farm, I would make less money than having the cactus combined with goats. And if I just had the goats, I would make less money than having just the cactus, you get me? So it's like, as ranches, I don't know why in the past like decades we split ourselves off from also being farmers, you know what I mean? Like you still see a lot of it, like people grow corn and then they have huge cow operations, right? They're vertically integrated, but it's getting rarer and rarer, and we need to get back to that. And as water and the climate resources are changing all over the world, agave, and the aim of this podcast, cactus, has a huge potential of offering people a reliability that they don't have in this new century of raising animals, right? That their grandparents had. Like, my grandpa, he had consistent rain, consistent water. Nobody in his time had wells. They all had water coming from rivers and stuff, right? Surface water. And, they had affordable feed prices. It's just like today, stuff on the feed side is doubling and tripling sometimes over 1 year period. And then water resources, I see farmers getting cut off. I see farmers getting 50-75% reductions in their water. I see so much issues with maintaining the farm or ranch in California today versus 50, 100 years ago, right? Even the secure water that we have of groundwater is not so secure, because just look at, places like, Central Valley, where in certain places is dropped like 50, 60 feet. Like, they have telephone poles where you can see where the land was 50, 60 years ago, right? Because of subsidence, because of groundwater pumping. And it's not an infinite resource. And in 2011, they passed Sigma, which is, the groundwater bill, and now you have meters on wells, you have ways that people are being regulated on how they use their water, right? So we have to think of ways that don't take new wells, that don't take new surface water, of growing feed for our animals. And cactus and agave fit that criteria. It fits the bill, you know? So I hope that more people want to start cactus farming that are in animals, because, as I mentioned, it could be fed to everything from birds to, you know, like chickens and geese, to emus like I had, and, you know, goats and pigs and cows and shit. I'm sure fucking bison and all types of stuff could eat the cactus, right? So I hope more people go about planting it and wanting to make a little bit more profit out of their animals, you know, because at the end of the day, I always tell people, it's like, if the farm isn't profitable, it's not going to stay in business. And you know, a lot of these cattle operations or goat farmers that are running on really low margins, if they want to make it to the next generation, they need to start innovating and not just keeping everything the same. And, you know, cactus and agave is going to be a way that you can provide a little bit more profit without a crazy amount of new resources, and you know, maybe keep you in the game. But hopefully you learned something from this podcast, and you can start getting into cactus farming and making your ranch a little bit more profitable. You know, I would say I'm going to bring out a part 2 to this, but I'm trying to get my part 2 of the agave shawi video out. I recorded that, and then, you know, I deleted it on accident, so I got to re-record it. But it's fine, because I read a couple other articles that I wanted to talk about in that as well. So I'm going to re-record that and post it. But then I'll come back to cactus, and you know, it's not like I could teach you everything about cactus farming and how it applies to animals. And what has this been, 52 minutes? But I think this is a great primer for how cactus can, you know, impact your ranch, and why you should at least give it a chance. Yeah, let me see if, you know, quickly I got anything else I wanted to mention about this, but I think that should be it. You know, obviously, if you got any questions on cactus farming or how it applies to cattle or goats and stuff, send me a message on Instagram at Farming and Gardening California, or leave a comment in whichever place you're listening to this podcast. I think we're on Podbean, YouTube, and yeah, I just added Apple. We're on Apple Podcasts too. Well, I guess this is not what the podcast was about, but let me quickly mention that cactus has also been researched a lot and proven to be a excellent source of biofuel and energy. So we got energy plants now using cactus to, you know, power small cities or small industrial operations, and we have cactus being turned into biofuels. And I know in Brazil, they're very advanced at this, maybe a little bit more than America. Brazil's killing it on the biofuels. You know, the whole ethanol lobby here is probably why they don't want agave getting big, but like the corn growers. But yeah, I commend Brazil for a lot of that research being open source and public, because you could go read it. And you can see a lot of this potential that cactus has been having for biofuels and what they're using it for. You know, if you can dry farm cactus and feed your animals, make your farm a little bit more profitable, make cactus products, add some more micro businesses to your farm, while at the same time growing a fuck ton of it for a biofuel company or an energy company, you know, you start to see how a lot of this could be scaled up, right? So yeah, I guess that's the last little thing I'll leave you with. Maybe I'll do an episode on cactus biofuels, or agave and cactus biofuels, because agave is included in that now too. But yeah, have a great rest of the day, everyone. And if you made it this far, make sure to rate and leave a comment. Not sure how often I'm going to be bringing podcasts out, but whenever there isn't wind and I'm with my goats and I see it's the right time, I'll just talk about what's on my mind and stuff. I'm a one-take wonder. I don't do edits or retakes or any of that stuff. So as I record it, you see it or you hear it. So don't judge me too hard if I'm going off tangents, or what do you call it? Not staying on track sometimes. I always try to get back. How they say, it's good to weave, but you gotta come back always. So, yeah, everyone have a great rest of the day, and I'll catch you on the next podcast. Peace.